dancing fearless.
I was working on the next video in the video series called The Keys to Self-Motivation and Free Will, and decided to start with a review of the previous videos. But the review became too long, so I decided to make it a separate video. I am also under pressure to produce more videos. If I don't produce 1 or 2 videos each week, YouTube drops the ranking of all the videos on the channel. This video series is based on Chapter 9, The Idea of Freedom, from Rudolf Steiner's Philosophy of Freedom. It is Chapter 10 in the original unedited edition of the book. This is the most popular chapter and has the clearest and fullest description of the free ethical individualist. It is a mixture of philosophy and psychology that describes our inner and outer experience of life. A free PDF of the Philosophy of Freedom is available on our website, philosophofoffreedom.com. A more readable edition of Chapter 9 is also on the website. The video series is divided into 3 parts. Part 1, the basic factors of an act of will. Part 2, the idea of free will. And Part 3, the reality of free will. We have completed Part 1, so I will give you a short review of the videos in Part 1. I am repeating things and doing reviews so you can learn these principles. In order to apply these principles to life, we have to learn and remember them just like learning anything else. Steiner dedicated the Philosophy of Freedom to those who apply its principles. He dedicated the book to you. Since I doubt you would be watching this video if you were not serious about applying the Philosophy of Freedom to your life. Okay, let's start the review. The first video is Conceptual Intuition. To understand our own ethical life, we need to know why we act. This means we need to know how to review our actions and identify the ethical principles at work. An ethical life is determined by ethical principles, which are laws that guide our behavior. Ethical principles, like the laws of nature, are in the form of universal concepts. We cannot grasp laws by merely observing nature or by observing our deeds. These conceptual principles and laws are grasped intuitively by reflecting on our observations. We call this ability to grasp the concepts at the core of things conceptual intuition. If you recall to mind an action when you acted with intention and reflect on it, you can discover the ethical principle that directed your action. This is easier to do if you know what to look for. The 2 levels of morality videos describe the different kinds of motives and driving forces. These videos will help you identify which motives and which driving forces are at work within yourself. The basic factors of an ethical act of will are the idealistic will, ethical character, the motivated idea, and the different levels of morality. The first factor is idealistic will. After I act, I use conceptual intuition to discover the ethical principle at the core of my deed. Before I act, I use conceptual intuition to select an ethical principle to guide my act. To select an ethical principle, I conceptualize the life situation I am facing to lift it into the conceptual world. The ethical principle I then select is determined by my system of universal concepts. My will becomes an idealistic will when the principle that guides my action is determined before I act, and it is determined by my conceptual system. My will is then determined by my universal ideals. The next factor is ethical character. An idealistic will, empowered by my ideals alone, is a later stage of development we will discuss in the next video about ethical intuition. Normally, an act of will is not solely the result of a concept or an idea. It is also influenced by the individual makeup of the person. There are two main factors in an act of will: the motive and the driving force. The motive is the momentary goal that directs the act. The driving force is the more permanent factor of our established character. If several individuals are presented with the same idea for action, some may act on it, while others will not, depending on their character. Whether we act on an idea or not gives our life ethical character. Our character is built up over time by genetics, our surrounding environment, and individual decisions. You can see how it is important for the surrounding community to develop character in youth. But at some point, our established character limits our freedom. The chance of birth determines our family, ethnicity, gender, nationality, and religion. Our character is formed by these group influences. Eventually, some group members will decide they no longer want to remain a conditioned stereotype of a group they did not choose. The philosophy of freedom is about moving on to develop one's own individual ethical character. The next factor of an ethical act of will is the motivated idea. There are many knowers who are not doers. They have good ideas, but lack the motivation to act. How do we turn an idea into a motivated idea? For every action, there is an idea or motive and a driving force of our character. An idea becomes a motivated idea when the idea meets the approval of our established character. Our built-up character of stored ideas and feelings provides the driving force to motivate action. This match of motive and driving force can happen in two ways. One, we find the driving force that empowers the motive. Or two, we find the motive that releases the driving force. Matching motive and driving force is one way we can motivate ourselves. The next factor of ethical action is the levels of morality. There are different levels of driving force, and there are different levels of motives. Earlier, I mentioned that to grow ethically, it is important to know why you act. The two levels of morality videos describe the various motives and driving forces that determine our action. We can use this knowledge to help us identify the motives and driving forces at work in our life. Video A is about the different moral levels of driving force found within our character. They are instinct, feelings, practical experience, and practical reason. The highest driving force is practical reason. Practical reasoning is a kind of pure conceptual thinking that takes place within our system of universal concepts. Practical reason is when we use pure reason to determine how to act. This is the objective, creative thinking of open-minded scientists, mathematicians, philosophers, and innovators who think in universal concepts. These are the thinkers who have new ideas that spur world progress. A person capable of practical reason is self-motivated to act ethically according to what he regards as right. This is moral freedom. Video B is about the different moral levels of motives. The lowest level of motive is egoism. Then we have moral authority, the highest principle, and the situational principle. Moral authority follows a set system of ethical principles imposed by an authority. What I call the highest principle is when you reflect on the needs of moral life and select the one you consider to be the most important. It may be the common good, the cultural good, or the individual good. After you select the principle that you consider to be the highest, you try to apply this single principle to various life situations. The situational principle is the highest conceivable ethical principle and the most demanding. It considers all ethical principles to have value, and in each life situation asks which one is the right one to apply. Depending on the situation, the right principle may be the progress of culture. In another situation, it may be the common good. In a third situation, I may choose to further my own good. Most people are likely aware of experiencing most of the levels of morality. The point is to live consciously and strive to live at a higher level of morality. The philosophy of freedom gives us the principles of freedom, individuality, and ethics to guide our growth as free, ethical individualists. In the next video, we will begin part 2 of the video series called The Idea of Free Will. The video is called Ethical Intuition. We will discuss the 2 highest levels of morality, practical reason and the situational principle. To not miss any new videos, subscribe to the channel.